All right, let's start on page 23, see how far we can get. This is a continuation of Schaeffer Cox exposing Yvonne Lamoureux's appeal summary. This is an answer by the government. This is a wicked Jezebel from hell who is working, she's making a career and she's making a life, a living off of the persecution of an innocent man named Schaeffer Cox. All right, that's his address. I pray you guys write him a letter. Let's get on. Okay, at this top you'll see page 23. That matches up with this 23 here. Let's read what Yvonne has to say. Retaliate even if he were only arrested, making it clear that his violent plans were no longer limited to an unlikely hypothetical, but to a concrete imminent event, and that's a BS alert. These circles are BS alerts by Schaeffer Cox. Cox also obtained personal information about Alaska State Trooper Ron Wall. Prior to May 2010, Cox had met with Trooper Ron Wall at the Alaska State Trooper office in Fairbanks. Twice in one day over Mother's Day weekend, 2010, Trooper Ron Wall observed Cox drive by his house located in an isolated area. On the night of June the 9th, 2010, Cox approached Ron Wall's home unannounced. Ron Wall assumed that there was going to be a problem and felt exposed and vulnerable. Ron Wall sent his wife and children upstairs, drew his weapon, and took a position behind a vehicle when he saw Cox driving up the driveway. Cox's wife, Marty Cox, was with him, could see that Cox was wearing body armor. A conversation ensued wherein Cox talked to Ron Wall about his problems with OCS, the fact that he had relinquished his United States citizenship, and his militia, which Cox said had 3,500 members. Cox claimed that he was concerned that members of his militia would harm troopers, judges, or their... Keep in mind this is page 23. Let's see what Cox said about page 23. Cox never gave instructions to retaliate even if he were only arrested. The record does not support Lamoureux's representation. In fact, it supports the opposite. Okay, let's go over to page 24. As you can see, this is page 24 right here. Families and troopers' families, if something happened to him or his child. Cox told Ron Wall that he wouldn't do it, but he couldn't control members of his militia, and he didn't know how they would react if something happened to him or his family, or he was taken into custody. Ron Wall understood Cox's words to be a veiled threat against him. That's a circle and a BS alert. Cox phrased his statements along the lines of, he would hate to see troopers or their families killed or injured. Section 3. Cox enlists Anderson to move his weapons and participate in security detail. In 2010, Cox was charged with domestic violence. Soon after, Cox asked Anderson to remove weapons from Cox's home, and Anderson agreed. Anderson observed a silencer, a Sten machine gun, which Cox previously told Anderson was fully automatic, and several grenade holes at Cox's home. In spring, early summer 2010, Cox asked Anderson to be a part of a security detail for Cox during his meeting with OCS as part of Cox's domestic violence. Anderson agreed, and the next day put his AK-47 firearm and tactical vest in his vehicle and drove to the meeting location. Cox tasked Anderson to find out. Okay, this is page 24. Let's see what Schaeffer Cox has to say about page 24. If Trooper Ron Wall really took Cox's statements as a threat, he would have arrested Cox on the spot for it, or at the very least filed a police report on it. But Wall testified he did neither, and Cox testified he was telling Wall about Bennett and Fulton's violent threats. Okay, let's go to page 25. All right, there it is, page 25. Where WW, the OCS officer in Wendy Williams, the OCS officer in charge of his case, lived. Cox explained he needed to know where she was because if she hurts his family, she might get a bullet through her windshield. Following Cox's directive, Anderson obtained Wendy Williams' home address. Number 4, that's a BS alert. Number 4, Cox holds militia commissioning ceremony. By summer 2010, Cox's public statements and aggressive encounters with federal and state officials had created concern, and the FBI asked Olson, a cooperating witness with active ties to the militia movement, to contact Cox if he could learn more about his plans. Olson had been charged with a BS alert, felony in the state of Alaska, and, in hopes of some leniency in his sentencing, had been providing assistance to law enforcement. In part because Olson had previous ties to a militia in Montana, Olson's background suggested that he would be able to develop a relationship with Cox. Olson made his initial contact with Cox in the summer of 2010. In August of 2010, Cox held a militia commissioning ceremony at Barney's residence for new members to be commissioned in and sworn. Okay, that was page 25. Here's what Schaeffer has to say about page 25. OCS, Office of Children's Services, and Wendy Williams is all state stuff, not federal. To say Olson was charged with a felony in state court is a gross understatement. Take a look at Rich Kurtner's cross-examination of Olson. Okay, and then he goes to page 27. So we're going to jump to page 27. All right. Was interviewed at King Jesus North Pole, KJNP, a television station near Fairbanks. Cox instructed the security that's a BS alert. Cox instructed the security details to shoot to kill if a plainclothes agent draws down on Cox or one of the other protectees. BS alert. Cox held several meetings to organize the security teams for his court hearing and KJNP appearance, anticipating the arrival of federal agents. A whiteboard titled Security Team, seized from Cox's house, described the plans together with options for responding to plainclothes agents, including lead poisoning. In addition, handwritten notes seized from the residence of Cox, Barney, and Vernon reflected Cox's directions for the security details, such as use grenades to stop, BS alert. During one of the briefings, Cox instructed his men that they had to be prepared to kill federal agents and described a scenario where they would stomp the killed federal agents through the ice, BS alert. Cox called the federal agents soulless assassins and said if we could kill one of them, they're not going to be missed. They're not going to come looking for you. BS alert. Okay, that's page 27. Let's see what Schaeffer has to say about page 27. Lamoureux says Cox instructed people to shoot to kill. This is a total mischaracterization of the exhibits she cites. AER 1502, 1518, and 1569 are actually helpful to the defense. They do not say shoot to kill. In fact, they say only shoot if life is in danger, and even then use a non-lethal CS gas and hornet's nest. The whiteboard 1502 is our best exhibit. Get a good color picture of it to see. Also see SA Special Agent Sutherland's summary of this meeting where he says Cox said over and over that he did not want violence and that he did not want to see any cops hurt. Docket 535-1, sealed, page 81 or maybe page 84, hard to read, of 96. Another comment on page 27. The use grenades to stop comments were referring to CS non-lethal riot control grenades, not real grenades. No real grenades were ever found. CS grenades were, and Olson testified that they were CS grenades on page AER 591. Also on page 27. AER 590, $300,000 whore Olson says he debriefed with Special Agent Sutherland about how Cox told him to kill people and stomp them through the ice, but Sutherland's summary says Cox's plan was civil disobedience and that he did not want any cops to get hurt. Docket 535-1, page 81 of 96. Sutherland email Monday, November 22nd, 1850, 34-210. Subject Cox update that if you go to AER 1185, Cox's actual quote about violence is, now we want to avoid that at all cost. We'd rather send them packing with their tail between their legs than kill them and have to stomp them through the ice or something. Lamoureux says Cox described a scenario where they would stomp the killed federal agents through the ice. This is an attempt to deceive the judge. It makes it sound like Cox wanted that to happen, when if you read AER 1185, Cox describes the scenario as something we want to avoid at all cost. Also on page 27, Schaeffer writes, AER 1183 through 84, these soulless assassins with no families were non-existent, rumored, murdered for hire guys who didn't actually exist. It was just a rumor, and that's all. And on 1184 speaker is actually Cox when he says you kill a Fed and they're going to start coming out like cockroaches, but it's not going to be a story. There's not going to be any charges because these guys aren't supposed to exist. So as a matter of fact, they didn't exist at all, and even the rumor wasn't about Feds. On top of that, there was no conspiracy, only a vague fear that if we got attacked, we might have to defend ourselves. Now we'll go to page 28. Okay, you guys see that? That's page 28. Cox told the this is what Yvonne Lamoureux says in her appeal, which is full of lies. Cox told the security team members that they needed to be guys who've come to terms with the fact that if somebody shows up at a TV station because it's an hour long and it's live to try to kill Judge Bartell or Marty Cox, you might have to kill them. Schaeffer puts a BS alert. Cox also said that he had bought a whole bunch of hornet nest grenades to be loaded into grenade launchers attached to their rifles, which he could provide to the security detail members. Barney was in charge of Cox's security detail at KJNP to protect Cox from federal agents. BS alert. Barney was armed that night with a 37mm launcher loaded with hornet's nest anti-personnel rounds attached to his AR-15. Vernon and Gary Brockman, other members of the security detail at KJNP, were also armed that night as part of Cox's security detail. When they arrived, the security detail set up lights, established a vehicular funnel point, BS alert, and stopped at least one incoming vehicle while visibly armed with weapons. Barney set up on... Okay, this is page 28. Let's read what Schaeffer has to say about page 28. Again, she makes it sound like Cox said to kill people, but AER 1185 and 1186 show that Cox actually said to avoid killing anyone at all cost. Then went on to explain how non-lethal riot-controlled tear gas, hornet's nest, rubber bullets, and pepper spray could be used, and hopefully we could, get them to go away if they can. So the record shows a specific, stated, clear intent to avoid killing someone at all cost. Also on page 28, Schaeffer says, protect Cox from federal agent isn't the whole story of Barney's testimony. On AER 1120, Barney says, there's plenty of other information on that whiteboard to shows we went out of our way to use non-lethal means first and only as a last option in self-defense to use lethal means. We weren't going to. We weren't planning. We didn't. He also says on page 28, there was no vehicular funneling point, just a few guys standing by the entrance to the TV station. That was at the end of a dirt driveway. Now he goes on to page 30, so we'll go on to page 30. All right, here's page 30 right here. Town, and there's a lot of people out there that would just as soon come and kill you in your home at night than come and argue with you in your court by day, and that is just as bad and wrong as pretended governments or governments that are acting outside of the law. And then he puts a BS alert. A few days later, after subsequent court hearing, Cox wanted to serve some papers on another state court judge. Alaska State Trooper Schoenberg told Cox that to get the paperwork served, Cox needed to file paperwork with the clerk's office on the lower level of the courthouse. Trooper Schoenberg was surrounded in close proximity by Cox, and after 4 other men with Cox, including Barney, and Cox told him, we've got you guys outmanned and outgunned, and we could probably have you guys all dead in one night. BS alert. Number 7, Cox sends Vernon and Olson to Anchorage to attend militia convention and buy grenades. The month before he was arrested, Cox directed Vernon and Olson to go to Anchorage and attend a convention on behalf of his militia. AER 639-41. Before their trip, Cox told Vernon and Olson to get as many. Okay, this is page 30. We got 2 BS alerts. Let's see what Schaeffer has to say. If you go listen to the audio referenced in AER 931, Cox says, could probably have you all dead in one night, but how would that help anybody? How would that help anyone? He also says AER 0643, Olson never says Cox told him to get real grenades, only legal grenade bodies. No C4 was ever bought or sold in real life or in pretend, so the government never charged anyone with C4 possession, etc. Then the next page is page 31. Okay, as you guys can see, this is page 31. Pineapple grenades, as you can get because we'll just thread the bottoms and stick an ALS fuse in them. BS alert with a circle. Cox also explained that if he could get pineapple grenades with the hole in the bottom, they could tap it and put a bolt in it, put gunpowder in it, and put in a new fuse. Cox added that he already had the new fuses. Cox then brought up C4 explosives, which would be good to have, and said he knew someone who would make C4 for them and that he had discussed the price with him, but it would depend on the shelf life of the C4. Vernon and Olson traveled to Anchorage and followed Cox's direction. BS alert. Vernon and Olson drove directly to a military surplus store in Anchorage owned by Bill Fulton, whom Cox knew. Vernon asked to buy grenades from Fulton. During subsequent conversations that weekend, Vernon said that, okay, that's page 31. Schaeffer says, AER 1193 through 94, Cox says that pineapple grenades and 2-second fuses are for CS and smoke, not real blow-up explosive grenades. Cox then says he just buys whatever is a good deal and sells it to the next guy. AER 1196, Cox indicates he doesn't need it. This hardly would be the case if he was plotting a shootout. Also on page 31, in the audio files where Olson is calling Cox from Anchorage while at the FBI-sponsored convention at the Millennium Hotel, Cox tells $300,000 whore Olson and Vernon to stay away from Fulton and Bennett. They did not listen or follow Cox's instructions. See AER 0683. But this is not the full audio. You need the full one from Discovery to hear Cox tell them to stay away from Fulton and Bennett. If Cox's instructions were not followed, Cox shouldn't be held liable for Vernon's words or actions. Okay, let's go on to page 32. Okay, this is page 32 right here. He wanted to purchase grenades, 50 grenade fuses, and a suppressor. While in a hotel room with Olson and Fulton, Vernon described the plan. Fulton, yeah, but check this out. We were on this whole thing with Schaeffer Cox, and I want to talk to you about this, but you are not going to cause the fucking militias in the state of Alaska to rise up. Vernon, no, 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 no. Fulton, Schaeffer Cox, on the other hand, will. Vernon, yeah, he will. That's what he wants. He wants the big show. But what I'm getting at, what he said to them, Fulton, yeah, Vernon, and I saw that, is they're running fucking scared. There's a whole bunch of them little dickweed judges out there. But you know what? We know all of them. We know where they live. We know the district, the assistant district attorney. He's a fucking Nazi, little fuckwad. That's BS alert on Vernon. Vernon, we're peeking over the fence. They're looking at, you know, what will come, what will happen if we take him down. What if they do come to our house? Well, you know what? That was already pre-planned. Fulton, what was? Vernon, the family thing. We made it a long pact a long time ago. Okay, and then that was page 32. And then Cox says, AER 1204, 1253, Vernon, Olson, Fulton, and Bennett are highly intoxicated. The alcohol was free and provided by Fulton. None of them were even coherent. This is from Schaeffer about 32, 33, and 34. The quote of drunk Mr. Vernon is spliced together like it's one quote, but it's not. Go read AER 1258. Vernon says, no, 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 no. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. No, 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 no intention. And AER 1269, there's an inaudible that isn't inaudible at all. It's just Fulton saying he's going to war over Schaeffer, which is why Schaeffer Cox left the country. AER 1271 through 72, Fulton puts everything on Cox's shoulders. Olson says we need to make it clear that he needs to have a plan. Then Fulton asks, so is the plan to get arrested and then go after judges? Vernon answers, we started that once and it went away, referring to Fulton's last attempt at Blondie's. AER 1274, they say Schaeffer has no plan, and if he gets arrested, he'll just go to jail for 30 days and stir up a beehive. AER 688-690 says Olson talked about it 3 weeks later, but that was 12/19/11, recalling where Cox said not to do anything violent and he was leaving the country for safety. Okay, this is page 32. We're going to go to page 33. Mr. Fulton, what family thing? What the fuck are you talking about? Vernon, now listen to me. Listen to me. If they fuck with one of us, Fulton, you know, he's a buffoon. Buffoon Fulton. Uh-huh. Lonnie Vernon, truck driver. When we go to their house, all of them with the titles. Buffoon Fulton. Yeah. Vernon, we'll drag them out and they will never find them. Buffoon Fulton. Okay, but not for families. You're not talking about going after innocents. Vernon, we're talking about everyone involved in this. Fulton, you're not talking about going after innocents. Vernon, the first round. Fulton, no children. Vernon, the first round will be all the ones involved in it. $300,000 whore Olson. Like the judges or... Keep in mind, Vernon is sitting in a room with two informants. One of them is a $300,000 whore, Gerald J.R. Olson. The other one is Buffoon Fulton, and they're buying liquor and whiskey and wine or whatever they're drinking, and they're passing around for free, and everybody's just shooting the crap, and Vernon doesn't even realize that he's in the middle of like Satan's living room, you know, with informants everywhere and being, you know, but Vernon talks like a truck driver, and he's probably talking and inebriated, and he's known to run his mouth, but that doesn't mean that he's got any intention to kill anybody. Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. Vernon, I have a recording of Vernon saying, we don't want to hurt anybody. Mr. Vernon, yep, they're going to get gone. They can put up all the people around their house, all the snipers they want, whatever they want to do, but one way or the other, they know when it'll happen. Then he puts a BS alert. Mr. Vernon, okay, if they pull a gun when we go in there too, I'm sorry, it's part, you made it happen, asshole. Fulton, yeah, but what you're talking about is premeditated, and you know that. Mr. Vernon, well, Fulton, no, I'm not going to sit here and fucking play pansies and then inaudible. Okay, this is page 34. They make it premeditated the day they do wrong to us. Okay, section 8, the 241 plan, I'm not against mailing heads to people. On February 12, 2011, Cox held a meeting at Ken Thessing's residence in Fairbanks with Barney, Thessing, and Olson, AER 699. Thessing had a rank of major in Cox's militia, CAER 1587. Text from Cox to Barney on 12/7/10, just talked to Maj, Major Thessing, about a battle plan. Cox said that he was not going to appear at next scheduled court hearing and instead raised the idea of 241, a plan whereby if Cox or any militia members were killed, then Cox and the others would kill two other people, such as law enforcement and judges, in retribution. During this meeting, Cox said that two state court employees, MG and RW, need to dangle together like a wind chime. When Barney asked whether 241 would be triggered by Cox being arrested, Cox responded, I believe that it is absolutely morally allowable to activate 241, that's in brackets, if they were to come and arrest Ken Thessing, for the three of us to go kick in the judge's door and the troopers and arrest two of them. And after hearing from Barney, Thessing, oh, that's a different page. Okay, what was that? That was page 34. If we come over here, I don't have my, man, I can't read that. I don't have any of the ER pages. I only have AER 001-1627. I need to look at AER 376-98 to see what it really says. Okay, now we're going to go to page 36. Okay, here's page 36. Okay, this will probably be the last page for this section. Page 36. After hearing from Barney, Thessing, and Olson, Cox summarized, all right, well, let me give you guys my thoughts. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. My thoughts on 2-for-1 is that we're not in a strong enough position to execute more than once. We're not in a strong enough position to follow through. And so at this point, what we should do is everything we can to avoid it. What we should do is we should bluff it for all it's worth and pray for God's protection and shielding hand and work and train and get ready to where we can turn that 2-for-1 into a real ability instead of just inaudible. And then he puts a BS alert. Cox and Barney then discuss next steps. Barney, in the meantime, training up guys and inaudible guys go through and getting them ready. Cox, so that we can turn it from a bluff to a Barney in action. Yeah, Cox, yeah, and we'll take the we're ready, and the road I'll take is we're ready, and we could have you dead in minutes, but we're all long-suffering, and we want to be your friends. You've got to stop pushing. We want to be at peace. We're going to continue long-suffering, but not forever. Barney then volunteered that we should get those little target bullseye things to put them on the back of windows of all the cop cars, because Cox had decided not to appear for his next court hearing on the weapons charge, and they anticipated that an arrest warrant would be issued. Barney offered that. Okay, that's page 36. Schaeffer says, again, Cox plainly states we should do everything we can to avoid it, 2-for-1. This is putting off the conspiracy because of the very real fact that we couldn't pull something like 2-for-1 off even if we wanted to. 36. This would be a good place to sneak in pages 11 through 17 of Camille's sentencing memo that deals with the true outcome of the 2-for-1 talk. Interestingly, near the top of page 13, Cox refers to 2-for-1 as Olson's plan, and then explains how it wouldn't achieve anything good. And with that, and with what you, Olson, were talking about for the 2-for-1 and stuff like that, meaning just a gesture, that's looking for a fight. Cox explained to Olson that the best thing to do was nothing and let nature take its course with socio-economic dynamics. Okay, the next one is page 30. Looks like he goes back to page 35. Okay, let's finish page 35 because that was before 36. So that's 35 there. That matches up with that 35 there. Notice how he was at 36 and he goes back to 35. Because it's war. It doesn't even really have to be ones that did it. And it's not just a war. In fact, it's a war declared by them explicitly without mincing any words. And so I think it's absolutely morally allowable that if they arrested Ken Thessing or arrested me, to go in and arrest 2 of them. If they kill one of us, we kill 2 of them. Okay, Cox continued that he would be well within his rights to go drill McConaughey in the forehead and any of these people that were propagating this because they're posing a huge threat to my life and my family. Schaeffer puts a BS alert. McConaughey was the state court judge presiding over his pending criminal case. After Olson sought clarification about 2-for-1, Cox instructed, go for the ones that were either authorized or failed to prevent, reasoning that because then they'll give people pause to authorize or fail to prevent. Cox continued, I'd say the trooper that did it and the trooper that authorized it and the judge that authorized it, it would be kind of the top people. Cox expressed that it's a tough issue because it's easier to get ready to die than it is to kill. Nevertheless, Cox said that he was willing to kill. Okay, that's page 35. Okay, Cox says about page 35, Traverso says to the judge about the deceptively edited audio exhibits being presented by Scrocky, these are clips. These are bites. These are not the whole meaning. But those are just clips or bites that didn't tell the whole story. The judge, then Judge Bryan says that's certainly true. The evidence in this case shows that. Okay, and then he also, what Schaeffer says about page 36, point out here that the government conceded that so-called conspiracy was a remote future contingency. The reason we're here this morning is because you've seen over the past 6 weeks evidence that these individuals are working on a plan. They're working on another form of government. And in the long term, we're not telling you it was going to happen today, that it was going to happen tomorrow, that it was going to happen next week, because this whole case is about when we're going to be strong enough. Government closing argument, page 4. Sentencing memo, page 41. Also, at the end of those same 6 weeks, Judge Bryan said, well, here's the thing that I guess is a little bit troubling to me. There were no federal agents that we know of. There might as well have been little green men from Mars, and so if it's the existence of federal agents or the likelihood of federal agents coming to arrest Mr. Cox, is that a condition precedent that has to be met here with some evidence in order to get to a conspiracy? Scrocky. We don't. Judge Bryan. That's realistic, you know, realistic conspiracy. Also, case agent Sutherland testified, my understanding of that conversation between Cox, Barney, Thessing, and Olson was that there was too few people, and that violence would be fruitless, and that the response would be quickly squashed. Trial transcript, page 14-146 and 147. So at the end of the government's case, the judge, the prosecutor, and the case agent all are saying the same thing, that this is some Mad Max future fantasy about working on another form of government, that there were no federal agents that we know of, there might as well have been little green men from Mars, and that there was too few people, and that it would be fruitless, and that the response would be quickly squashed, and the defendants knew it. We've got the three most important people in the prosecution of this case making statements that underscore how harmful the erroneous jury instruction was when it removed the intent requirement as an element. The bad instruction allowed the jury to convict Cox for simply wishing he was strong enough to put the federal government in its place, even though he admitted he was powerless to do anything and decided to leave the country rather than get into a conflict of any kind. There was no agreement to attack the government. That's the heart of a conspiracy. An intent on agreement, a mens rea for the crime. In this case, the agreement was for Cox to leave the country and to avoid conflict. There were lots of big-time overt acts in furtherance of that agreement, like packing up and moving out of the house with all our stuff and driving toward Canada with a wife and 2 kids, all the while saying, this is what has the brightest future for my family. I don't have any hatred toward them, the government. It's best if I just walk away, even if it costs me everything I have. See AER 1367 through 74. All right. We're going to stop on page 36. We'll pick up with page 37 once we begin again.